Hi, and welcome to Just One More Thing, a podcast about knitting and craftiness. I'm your host, Janessa, and this is episode 9. Hey, almost to the double digits. I am so glad that you're stopping by today to spend a little of your knitting time with me. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. I'm going to jump into knitting and finished objects. I honestly didn't think I was going to have anything to show you today because I spent the majority of the week working on this item. I didn't think I would have it done at all. And yeah, so I thought this was going to be like, I worked on 2 things and neither of them are done, and like shortest podcast ever. But I actually did finish this. It is the Tree of Life Afghan that I've been working on. And it's really big, so big that I can't really fit it all on screen. So here's a picture. So I'll talk to you a couple things about it. I used nearly every little bit of the Caron 1 pound is the yarn that I used for the gray. And I think I had like, maybe like 5 ounces or something. It was a very small, like teeny tiny amount left. And there really wasn't even enough left to get through another round of knitting. So I didn't quite use all of it, but nearly all of it. And then I decided, instead of going and getting a whole nother huge skein that I was not going to be able to use all of, I decided to do the bind off in that contrasting red, which is Lion Brand Love. I think it's Berry was the color of it. And I didn't hardly have to use any of that for an I-cord bind off. So there's the bind off. I really like how it came out. I washed it and pretty much soaking wet hung it out on my line so that it could kind of stretch out. Acrylic is so hard to block, but I find that if I let the weight of the water stretch it out, it really comes out nice. So yeah, I pretty much just let the weight of the water do all of the work, and it stretches it out, and it really opened up all the stitches to make it real lacy. In that picture, you can tell, like, you can nearly see through it. And it really kind of reminds me of those little minky blankets that, you do for baby knitting, because it just has that little bit of texture on it. It's nice. So I'm happy with this. It's going to go to its recipient soon. And I couldn't be happier. I think I'll be making one for myself. Not right away, but eventually. I think I will be making one for myself. At a nicer yarn. I just kind of liked it. You will probably remember that I completely set this project aside for like an entire week. I just was having such a hard time. I was knitting it on size 11 needles, which are very large for my normal knitting. The yarn was very heavy and, so it was giving me a lot of hand fatigue, particularly because with the way that I knit, when I tension yarn, usually if I'm just knitting with the yarn in the back, is to put it over my finger like that. And then I switch and I hold it like this so that I can go, and of course it's not working now, so I can go back and forth and back and forth. There it goes. Anyway, you get the idea. So I can go back and forth with the knitting. So this finger moves a lot like this, and you're kind of twisting your wrist, and it was giving me a lot of hand fatigue right along in here. And so that's, I couldn't hardly ever knit on it. Like, I'd do a row and I'd have to put it down. But then, remember last week when I told you I learned a new skill and I didn't know when I would ever need it? Yay! This is the project that needed it. I was able to keep the yarn held in back, so I didn't have to move this finger back and forth. Everything just kind of stayed in back, and this wrist was doing more movement, which is fine because it wasn't holding up the weight of the knitting like this hand does. So yeah, I was able to kind of cure my hand fatigue by using that purling with the yarn held in back, the Norwegian purl. Why do they call it the Norwegian purl? Do you know? I don't know why they call it the Norwegian purl, and I really hope it's because a Norwegian like invented it or something, and that's why we call it that. I have like an odd suspicion that it's more of, I don't know. Do you know how with the Muppets we call this the chef, the Swedish chef? Well, in Sweden they don't call it the Swedish chef because it's kind of like an insult to their culture. And so they call him the Norwegian chef in Sweden. Have you guys ever heard that? I kind of get the feeling that we call it the Norwegian purl, not because a Norwegian invented it. And I really hope that's not the case. If anyone knows why we call purling with the yarn held in back a Norwegian purl, I would love to know. And I hope that it's not being derogatory or insulting in any kind of a way. And if it is, somebody please educate me so I can do better. Anyway, I used that purling method, whatever it's called, to really help out the hand fatigue on this. And that is why when I put it aside, I was like a quarter of the way done. And I flew through those last 3/4 of the knitting just because I didn't get tired of working on it. I could knit on it quite a bit more. And I got done faster. So that little, I don't know when I'll ever use it, tool has really been coming in handy lately. And that's enough of the finished object. Let's move on to things that I'm actually knitting on. Because it's right here on top, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the Joji Locatelli mystery wrap. So here's your warning. If you don't want spoilers, fast forward just a little bit. We're going to talk about that, and then we'll get on to some other crafty fun stuff. So, I dropped some stitches. Oh no. Hold on. I gotta pick these up and fix this. Thank God for grabby yarn that is easy to pick up. Did I get them all? Yep, I did. Whew. That was not nearly as traumatic as it could have been. Okay. So I actually left these last 6 stitches on the needle because I'm in the middle of a twisted rib section. And so I'm using that purling with the yarn held in back because it makes knitting through the back loop so much easier. So I'm doing a knit stitch. Now I'm doing a purl stitch. Whoop. See how fun and easy that was? There are tutorials out there online that show you exactly how that maneuver is done, but I just absolutely love that new stitch now because it makes ribbing like that a lot easier. Anytime I don't have to do this with my hand, because that really does wear on your wrist when you are twisting like that and moving this. So for the continental knitters out there, it really does help. Okay, so let me show you my Joji mystery wrap. Try to hold it back like this. So here is, I'm almost through clue 3. Clue 2 brought me to the gray stripe right here, the bluish gray. So clue 3 is this purple and my kind of pink and black and blue. Okay, I'm going to show it to you close up like this. Here we go. So clue 3 started right here with this stripe. And then we worked into, that's some of my hand spun, that purple. We did another eyelet stripe. And then we have this. Now, I am making a modification. Clue 1, this is my color number 1 right here, the eyelet row. So clue 1 is supposed to do the eyelet row and then continue in that same color all the way through the ribbing. But I didn't really like how that looked, to be honest. I really like how that number 1 color is the contrast between all these chevron stripes. So I wanted to keep that contrast. I didn't want it to just melt into a next section, which I might end up regretting when clue 4 comes around. We'll see. So what I did instead, and I think I did a pretty good job with the subtlety, like I didn't do a drastic color change, and it's not a color that clashes with anything else that I have. I am using these 2 lace weight colors, and I'll show you. So I'm using these 2 lace weight colors to get that ribbing. So the brown's kind of showing up pretty nice, but then I've also got the gray in there. And it's not too different. This is what I'm using for color number 1. So it's really not too far off. You get a lot of those same kind of grays and brown tones in this skein as you do in these 2. So it's just enough difference that I can tell it's a different color, but it's not so different that it clashes with this. So I think that'll work out. And my plan is to just use it for that one little section of ribbing. I don't know that I'll bring these 2 back in. Maybe if there's another point where I'm like, I really wish there was some more contrast between those 2 sections, then maybe I will like bring these 2 back. I have plenty. So I don't know. We'll see. Just a slight modification. Another thing that I did, you might notice, and it will be easier to show you. In this sort of format, if I can find it, here we go. So these, sorry for messy round balls, these are all the same fiber. They're all my hand spun. These 2 are clearly chain plied because they're striped. They're all the same colors. And that's what I've been using on most of the shawl for my color number 3. This is 3-plied, but it's barber pulled, as you can tell. That's what I used for the section for the big chevron stripe. So let me hold that up for you again so you can see what I did. So here's a color number 3 right in here. There's a color number 3. And so you can see there where it obviously stripes right in here. And then you can see where it becomes a little more muddied or marled, would probably be the nicer term for it in this section. So that you still get a little bit of striping, but it just kind of, for that really big section, I think it just gave a little bit of interest to it. Because I can. That's why. You're asking. I hear you asking, why would you do such a thing? Why not just follow the directions and keep it the way it's supposed to be? Because that's not who I am, people. I knit dangerously, remember? I don't follow directions well. You guys don't care. So, anyway, you can kind of see, here's the other half, where it's all coming together. There it is, the Joji Mystery Knit Along. It is coming along nicely. I enjoy it. Need some coffee this morning. I only got one other thing that I worked on this week, and that is the Makariri shawl from Aurora Knits. And again, if I'm butchering those names, I apologize. I've not had anyone tell me any different, so I'm just going with it. So we're getting much wider triangle now. Things are growing, and the asymmetry is starting to kick in, where this side doesn't grow, but this side does. You can see it's, there we go, much longer on this side. So I am getting into the next striping section. Here was the first striping section and the lace. I finished all that garter. Now we're into the second striping section, and then there'll be another thing of lace. The only reason that this got the small, I think I did about maybe this much knitting on it Friday night. I think I got like to that very first stripe and maybe like 5 or 6 rows in the garter, and then I did these other stripes in the car yesterday while we were traveling for Memorial Day fun activities and adventures. But then we got into a part of Missouri that goes like this on the road, and I go, and I had to put the knitting away. I got a little green around the gills and could not knit in the car. So I didn't get too much car knitting done, unfortunately, but I got a little bit done on it. And I'll talk about those fun adventures here in just a little bit. So, that was all I knit this week. It doesn't seem like it was a lot. When you think about all the knitting that had to go into this monster, it was a lot of knitting. But it just doesn't seem like much because it was only those 3 things. That's what I get for being monogamous during a week in order to get something done. I do, however, have other crafty ideas on the horizon. So, because I didn't get any spinning done either, I might as well tell you why I didn't get any spinning done. We're just going to mix it all up. We're going to talk about the trip yesterday. So, it's a little chilly in here this morning with the air conditioner on. I'm going to cover up in my blanket. So, yesterday was Memorial Day in the U.S. Happy Memorial Day. And that meant my husband had the day off of work, so we could go do something with the kids. And I mentioned a couple of podcasts ago that we had been wanting to take the kids on the Katy Trail, which is a Rails to Trails initiative here in the state of Missouri. Old railroads that are no longer in use are being torn up and made into bike trails, because railroads make ideal bike trails. They're pretty much flat, and even when they do go up a hill, it's a very gradual grade of a hill, because that's what trains needed to get around. So The Katy Trail is part of the old Missouri, Kansas, Texas Railway. And I'm being very like educational right now. So anyway, it goes across the entire state of Missouri from just outside of St. Louis to just outside of Kansas City. And then there's some little spurs off it every once in a while. But for the most part, it's a straight shot. It's like 270 miles, I want to say, of trail that you can bike on. And it's really, really pretty in most spots. There's really scenic areas. The one we go to is down around Rocheport, which is home of a winery and many a bed and breakfast. So it's a really cute little town. And Ben was telling me yesterday that when they first opened this trail when he was in high school, so many years ago, that this little town that they would go to ride on was just like almost dead. There was just hardly anything there, really rundown houses, just not a lot around. And having this trail open up kind of really put this little town on the map. A winery opened there. Now, like, all of the houses have been redone, and they've got, like, all these bed and breakfasts, and there's a cute little chapel, and just kind of really, really, really helped this town out. So I love that. I love supporting that. Anyway, we took the bikes down. We rode 14 and a half miles. I'm a little sore today. And when I got home last night, I did not want to spin. I had done enough of this all day long. I didn't want to spin. So no spinning got done. And yeah, my legs are not as sore as I thought they would be after riding 14 miles and a half. That last half is really important. But it was a lot of fun. And we got to see some wildlife, which is always fun for the kids. And I was super proud of my little guy, Emerson, because he rode that 14. Like, I have a mountain bike. Ben has a mountain bike. Brooklyn has like a road bike. You know, with gears and all of that. So we all had pretty decent bikes to do this 14 and a half miles on. Emerson rode it on his little 16-inch Huffy. his little guy bike, which doesn't have any gears. It's, you know, our tires are like this and his are like this. So while we could like pedal, coast, pedal, you know, he had to do this all day long. So I was super proud, and we kind of let him set the pace. We're like, you know, when he gets tired, we're going to have to quit because we're not going to be nearly as tired as he is. He did all of that bike riding and still ran around all night last night and did not go to bed very easily. He had so much energy. It was insane. But I'll put a little video of, like, a little slideshow of some pictures and some video of us riding at the end of the podcast. So if you want to check that out, it was a lot of fun. And if you're in the Missouri area, you really need to go down and check out the Katy Trail. You know, like I said, it covers the whole state. So wherever you are, it should be pretty easy to get to. At least within it's a couple hours drive for us. But it's still well worth it to go. Okay, other crafty news. I have decided to join the Stash Dash that the Knit Girls, Leslie and Laura, are doing. This is something they do yearly. This was my first 700 and some meters. Actually, it was closer to 800 meters by the time I got this done. So that was my first 800 meters towards that. I still haven't fully decided which level I'm going for. I'm thinking I want to try for the 10K, but it might end up closer to the 7K. If you don't know what Stash Dash is, go over to the Knit Girls podcast and check them out. They have a whole little video explaining it, but it's basically a race against yourself to try and work through as much stash as possible during the summer months. It's fun. So I probably will be talking about that quite a bit during the next couple of episodes, as I finish projects, and you'll see that hashtag used quite a bit on my Instagram. I do have a fun... It's buried, so I won't be able to dig it out. I have a fun crafty project in mind that I'm excited to start on. Maybe this week. We'll see how it goes. I have all this hand-spun yarn that either I messed it up in some way, it really wasn't that great of a yarn, it was, you know, spun early on while I was still learning techniques, or I went through this phase where I was like trying to learn how to do art yarn, and then I realized I don't like art yarn because I can't knit with art yarn. So I have a lot of that kind of stuff in my stash that's taking up valuable stash room in my very small stash shelf. And so I want to use it. I want to display it. It's still pretty looking. It's just not very usable, I guess is the way to put it. So I do want to use it up, and I think I finally found out how I'm going to do that. So I bought some embroidery hoops, some of the wood embroidery hoops, and I bought, I think it was like maybe half a yard or so of burlap. I'll buy more later on, and maybe different fabrics later on to do this with. These were just like some cheap, we're going to give it a try and see how it works things. So I've got a hoop and some burlap. I'm going to do kind of a combination. Like, the vision I have in my head is a combination of crewel embroidery and rug hooking. And I'm going to do some little pictures to hang on this blank space back here, to kind of show off my yarn. So have you ever seen rug hooking? It's usually like an entire section, like kind of like a painting with yarn where you're pulling up loops through the fabric, and it kind of makes like a picture, like a rug. And people like hang them on their walls. Sometimes they actually use them as rugs. Well, I don't like the look of everything being covered in yarn. So what I'm going to do, I have this very clear vision in my head, and I'm worried that it's not going to turn out. I have asked some other rug hooking experts if they think this will work, and they're like, give it a try, you never know. So what I want to do is put like a picture of, I'm thinking of a chicken on this, you know, in the middle of this hoop, and kind of do like the chicken in rug hooking, and then maybe like the grass in the crewel embroidery, and maybe even do some like cross stitching for like the legs and the beak, and maybe put in like some clouds or something, you know, just kind of make a little scene of like a chicken on a hill. And leave some of the burlap open so that you can see the background. That's kind of the idea I have in my head. I don't know if it'll work out. I'm very intrigued by, this is a coloring book that I have. And I like that chicken. That's a fun chicken. But the chicken that I want, and I'm not going to use this one because this isn't my artwork, obviously. But I want a nice little primitive fat chicken like that. So to make it even more special, my daughter loves to draw, and she's actually really, really good. Like, she is very, very artistic. So I'm going to have Brooklyn look at this and be like, draw me a chicken on this, you know, hand her the marker and let her draw the chicken for me. And then I'll do like the rug hooking on it. So that's my next kind of crafty vision coming up. We'll see how it goes. I will keep you informed. I'll show you my progress. And maybe hopefully someday, like, I'll have a whole little gallery of my yarn hung up there on the wall. I also had this vision of maybe just doing like geometric shapes, like embroidering and like having some of the yarn go this way, you know, kind of making it look woven. Um, I don't know. I might still end up doing something like that, but I think it'll look kind of fun and cool, and it'll be a nice way to show off colors that I like and yarn texture that I like that just was unknittable. It just wasn't going to work for knitting. So, yay! The other thing that I have coming up this week, and it's kind of back to part of Stash Dash. They're allowing circular sock knitting machines this year for Stash Dash. So I have an old antique Gearhart sock knitting machine that I've used quite a bit in the past, but the needles need cleaned and it needs some oiling and it just needs to kind of be put back in working order. So my project this week is to get that knitting again, so you guys may see a lot of socks this summer. I don't typically hand knit socks anymore. I can, and I did a lot in the past. But then I was introduced to the sock knitting machine where I can crank out a sock in an hour, like a pair of socks in an hour, start to finish. Yeah, I can't hand knit socks anymore. Like, this is taking, even if it only takes like a week to do a pair of hand knit socks, I'm like, it's taking forever and it's never gonna get done. But if I get the sock knitting machine out, I'm like, and it's like, woohoo, I've got a pair of socks. So it spoiled me a little bit. I still get knit socks, hand knit socks. They're machine knit, but oh my god, it's so much faster. It pains me to have to knit socks the normal way now. It's just a fact. So, yay. I think a lot more knitting will get done on my actual knitting projects this week because I've got this out of the way. I might be able to get the crochet back out this week and work on like my memory blanket and a couple other crochet projects that I have in the queue. So I think next week will be a much longer episode because I will have gotten quite a bit more done. Anyway, I hope you have a great week. I hope the summer treats you well. And we will talk to you very soon.